Perhaps the only thing worse than the game out in Happy Valley was forcing Kevin to have to watch it inside his stable. Ladies and gentlemen, call PETA, call Child Services, call somebody, because if you don't need to put the pony through that misery. Welcome on into a very special episode of SEC Unfiltered Sunday Fun Day. He's Dave Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson, and today we react to the college football first round playoff. Real quickly, make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification down below, and subscribe to the channel because we talk college football every single day. And when you hit that ring notification, you are warned that we're going live, whether that be Sunday Fun Day, Tuesday night, Dave Talk Ball, the Monday morning Power Hour, whatever tickles your fancy. Make sure that, of course, you hit the ring notification so you stick around for everything that we talk about. Make sure that you follow us on the socials. Link is in the description. Download the podcast version of the show. Link is also in the description. Follow Dave at Mach 10 Sports, me and Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, the official sponsor of the SEC Unfiltered Tour. Go to prizepicks.com. Use the promo code SECU at sign up to get a $50 instant play when you play your first $5 lineup. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not just for college football. This is not just for the playoff. This is not just for some random bowl game where a third-string wide receiver hits the over with 150 receiving yards and you buy stock into 2025. This is for college basketball, too. It's the #1 college app out there. So go to prizepicks.com and use the promo code SECU at sign up to get your $50 instant play with a $5 lineup. Dave, we got a jam-packed show. Ladies and gentlemen, if you thought that the college football season was slowing down, I hate to break it to you, it's just heating on up. We're going to break down every single game, including those that don't have to factor into the SEC. Tennessee, what the hell happened? I mean, honestly, what the actual hell happened? We're also going to talk about what needs to change out at Rocky Top if there is going to be promise for 2025. More importantly, we got to break down what's going on in the transfer portal. College football never sleeps, and neither does the portal. There have been some names that recently were added in and some names that recently found a new home. But Dave Shumate, how was your weekend, my friend?
You're kind of a wild one for me. I was telling you and Chris, that's why I couldn't join on the reaction, the Texas Clemson reaction, Tennessee, Ohio State reaction.
Yeah, tell them why you weren't on last night.
Yeah, well, while leaving, the parents went and did Christmas early at the parents in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. For people who don't know, that's just above the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, kind of a good hub city to New Orleans. But left the old work laptop, and I live in Atlanta, so had to meet the parents today, halfway to go get it. Came back, so I've been on the road a lot the last day, Bear. But my sweet wife, was nice enough to drive the entire way so I could watch the Tennessee game at night on YouTube TV, on the YouTube TV app. If people don't have YouTube TV app, shameless plug here, Bear. Go get it. YouTube TV is a phenomenal.
Are you gonna pay? Are you gonna pay the new $89.99 a month?
Dude, I have to. I feel like I was one of the OG YouTube. Not to get off topic, I was one of the OG YouTube TV subscribers, dude. I remember getting that when it was $55 a month, and
I got that when it was $45 a month, dude. I got it at $45 a month.
Dude,
like, I was all
an OG too, dude. It may have been less than 50. I remember that. My wife would keep coming in big. Got another bill saying that this thing keeps going up every month, and I was like, yeah, I don't even subscribe to the NFL Sunday Ticket. But no, that's why I wasn't on yesterday. But we're here. We're here today, Bear. No, but fired up, man. It was. I know a lot of people were upset with how it went. Again, I wish we had phenomenal games across the board, down to the wire, overtime games. But we get these kind of clunkers sometimes. Not sometimes. We get it every year in the NFL. The NFL, it is what it is when it comes into postseason sports. But we had phenomenal football games. Again, not from a close game standpoint, but just we got great college football, meaningful college football compared to, no offense, Bear, but in the past we got the Camellia Bowl or the New Orleans Bowl. It's like, no offense to those teams who are tied into that.
They're disgusting. They're fantastic games.
So, beggars can't be choosers. So, would they've been closer? Would I like them to be closer games? Absolutely. But we did get meaningful playoff football before Christmas. So let's be excited.
I have my own thoughts on this. Let's go ahead and break it on down real quickly. Make sure that, of course, you hit the subscribe button because we talk college football every single day. 4 playoff games occurred over a span of 24 hours. And let's just call it as is. Anybody that wanted to see the upset, you were highly disappointed. Not only did every home team win in front of their fan base, they also covered in front of their fan base. Starting off on Friday night, Notre Dame dismantling a team in Indiana that really kind of proved our point when it came to the SEC argument of why does Indiana get that free pass? You go on into Saturday morning. Kevin Jennings provides 14 easy points to begin the matchup for Penn State. They've dismantled the Ponies en route to now a college football quarterfinal appearance and the first win for James Franklin in the postseason. Texas keeps things interesting for 4 quarters, but eventually when Steve Sarkisian decides to get away from the cute nonsense, decides to get a 14-point victory, and naturally Tennessee shows up away from Rocky Top, which is basically Rocky Top East in the shoe, and proceeds to be down 21-0 en route to a thwarting by an actual version of Ohio State that looks to be able to win a national championship. We got some takeaways. Here's the first one, Dave. Give me college football playoff games at home environments until the national championship. I'm all bought in. I don't care what anybody has to say about what would be the ratings or the actual sponsorship deals or how you would be able to afford more accommodation. You realize that every single NFL stadium is smaller than Bryant-Denny. It's smaller than Neyland. It's smaller than the Shoe. It's smaller than most locations that are going to be hosting these games in the semis, in the quarterfinals. And you don't get that atmosphere anywhere else but on campus. It's 6 a.m. and you walk outside and the cold, brisk air hits you in the face. It's South Bend, Indiana, and it's a winter wonderland, and college football is finally here. It absolutely feels like definite weather that you want to withstand and prove that you can go up against the tyrants. And the fans flock to go to College Game Day, and they're watching as Pat McAfee is running his mouth, and they're watching as Nick Saban's getting annoyed by Shane Gillis, and they're watching as the piling on in of matchups of what you see between two teams in the state of Indiana. And then you get 4 quarters of it being loud and dynamic, and the same thing happens in Austin. And I guarantee you it would happen in Tuscaloosa, and it sure as hell would happen in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and it would happen in the Swamp, and it would happen in Athens, and it would happen in Rocky Top, and it would happen in Lexington, Kentucky, and it would happen in Willie B on a Saturday night. It would happen in any single location. And just when you realize what that game day atmosphere feels like, it brought us back to the reality of what is college football. Why did we fall in love with this game? Because it is completely different than the branding, than the nostalgia, than all the other nonsensical shit that's thrown in for the NFL because of its college. And I thought that we embraced that fully over a span of 4 games. We watched as the actual environment being rewarded for being a higher seed voted in your favor, and it was nonstop what you expect when you watch a normal game. It felt like just another added on regular season game, but instead it was a winner-take-all showdown. That's what it felt like to me. I loved every bit about it. I love the fact that you had still the overall ambiance of what is a home crowd. I love the fact that you had people traveling on in. It made sense. To me, that's 100% what we have to see moving forward in this college football playoff.
Bear, I'm going to bring up seeding here in a minute, but who do you think had the biggest home field advantage yesterday?
Oh, it was Penn.
I'm going to say Penn State.
Not even remotely close.
Me and you were talking off air, dude. It looked like that cold. And again, it gets cold in Dallas, but like it felt like SMU looked cold. Like usually you don't see that a lot in football. And I know they have the heated benches, all the heaters stuff, but they looked like they were looking around just like shivering at times. It was like we mentioned, Tennessee got their ass kicked last night, but I never saw on the bench when they go to them, it looked like they were legitimately cold. Like, yeah, I don't know. It just looked like it was affecting them. But mine, I mean, I think it's a lot of people agree with, but it's just the low-hanging fruit, and it screams so loud that I just have to acknowledge it. Like, look, I mentioned I was glad we just had meaningful football, playoff football before Christmas instead of the New Orleans Bowl and the Camellia Bowl. But I do want closer games as well. And I think if we didn't just automatically reward the auto conference buys and just ranked them 1 through 4, and those got the buys, like Notre Dame would have gotten a buy, and they wouldn't even have been in this. They wouldn't even play. And I think we would have got better games across the board. And I think that's something we all can agree on. I don't really see anybody on social media. I don't really see anybody or hear anybody I talk to. It's like, no, I like the 4 conference champs, even though they may not be the 4 best, or two of the 4 may not be the best 4 teams.
Well, try to sell yourself on number 15 being the 3 seed. Like, try to sell yourself on the 4 seed being an Arizona.
I think it also, and it's not even just the buys; those teams get the buy. It screws Oregon, who has to play Ohio State now, who is arguably the 2nd best team in the country after what we saw last night. And we'll get to that one here in a minute. Just a little preview, little teaser there. Probably what my second thought of the weekend was. But no, I thought we got to get that changed. I feel like that would give us better, more impactful games. It also wouldn't penalize the top 2 SEC, the top 2 conference winners, and the 2 big time Power 4 conferences like Oregon and Georgia. Who, hey man, congratulations on being the 1 seed. Oregon, you get to play Ohio State, who you beat by 1 point at home a couple weeks ago. That's who you get to play in the quarterfinal game, your first game. Georgia, congratulations. You get to go play Notre Dame, who probably would be in that top 4 seed argument if there weren't automatic buys to certain conferences. So I think that's something that I think a lot of people would agree on. I don't think anybody disagrees with that for the most part. So I think that's something that stands out when we actually – I think when we saw all this get announced, we're like, all right, yeah, whatever. Now that we're seeing names inserted in these spots, it stands out and it's more glaring.
The other thing that's really important when it comes to breaking all this down is that you realize you still would get pretty good games, whether it was Tennessee versus Indiana or Notre Dame versus SMU, whatever it was, or SMU versus a Clemson again, or something along those lines. You would still get good games and you would see the progression, but you also would be getting good matchups. Like, think about this for a minute. Who didn't think for 1 second that the game out in Boise wouldn't matter if they played SMU? Like, if that was the first round matchup and then they had to play against Georgia, well, they get to host a playoff game. They get to play and probably win that game. Ashton Jetty gets to prove why he was deserving of being in the Heisman Trophy presentation. And then they have to go play Georgia. And Georgia gets rewarded for winning the SEC. And Texas doesn't get penalized for having to go play against a team that was really ended up showing up well in Clemson of all the 4 games. Second thing, anybody who is still buying into the notion that Cinderella can win the college football playoff is an absolute idiot. I'm sorry. You watched it yesterday. And if you still have this high hope that we're going to see a team come out of the ashes and prove to the world that it's fair in college football, it's not. It's not. And I've heard the argument, well, what happens in years past when we talk about the TCU squad that beat Michigan? You're right, they did beat Michigan. Now tell me this. It's a 12-team playoff. For starters, Kansas State gets that first round bye because if they won the Big 12 championship.
TCU probably been 6th or 7th.
They would have gotten a win in the first round. Maybe they would have beaten Michigan in the second round. But you're going to tell me that that team would be sustainable for 4 games all the way to the national championship to then have the same result against Georgia? Stop it. Stop it.
Yeah.
Just please stop. Cincinnati in 2021. I am a believer in Cincinnati. Cincinnati had 1 loss in 2 years.
Yeah.
And it was against Georgia. They dominated. They had multiple first-round picks. They had multiple players that are currently starting on Sunday. They had a great head coach in Luke Fickell. They had everything voting in their favor. And they belonged in the playoff that year because they did their job.
I saw that team firsthand. You're right. I mean, they had tons of NFL talent around them. Dude, they were just a different physically looking team. Like, you're right. They deserve to be in the playoffs. But you can admit to this, Bear. I think that was a 2-year campaign coming.
Right, exactly.
Again, it's a group of 5 team then to make a 14 playoff. That almost had to be a 2-year resume more than just the one-off resume. Like, you would attest to that. I think you had to almost build your resume to be that reputation of, no, we're the power and we're dominating.
They would have absolutely not even been included if they lost on a game-winning field goal to the number 2 team in the country. It didn't matter. They had to go undefeated. But tell me that with Desmond Ridder, you would have been able to have that same success. You couldn't get past Alabama starting in the 3rd quarter. You held them for a half. You should be proud of that. The 2007 Boise State team is the team that everyone talks about. Cinderella, how they were able to pull off the Statue of Liberty. And it's one of my favorite games of all time. In fact, that is a game that I look back on why I fell in love with college football, and I knew that I want to make this all about my life. Sell me that Jared Zabransky and Ian Johnson and Chris Peterson create that magic 3 more times.
No.
3 more times. Against an Oklahoma squad that was very good, but an Oklahoma squad that kind of took its foot off the gas because they thought they had that shit won. Cinderella is not existing anymore. SMU is a great story. The fact that you should be proud, if you're an SMU fan, that you made it as far as you did in year 1 of P4 play is saying something. The fact that Kurt Signetti comes on in year 1 tells everyone to Google him, and they kind of have to because of all he's doing is winning against inferior competition at a program that was beyond a laughingstock, and I know this because my dad is an Indiana alum, is something to be proud of. But that doesn't mean that you're going to go on this incredible anemic run that puts you in the national championship because of its talent gaps. And by the way, Dave, what was the best game we saw yesterday? It was Clemson and it was Texas. What do both those teams usually have? Top 15 recruiting classes, developing a future first-round talent, easily players that we're going to see continue to grow and turn into all conference level All-Americans. Yeah, that was a reason why they showed up and the blue chips actually balled out on offense. So stop with the Cinderella thing. Just because we added in 12 teams does not mean we're giving more chances for a Boise State or an Arizona State or a BYU or a Cincinnati in the future or a Toledo to go on these epic runs. You watched it yesterday. Before the thing that I took away most of all is when we watched these games, Dave, what we did was we didn't give opportunities for Cinderella to go to the ball. We put the ball in the mouth, then stomped on it. They started gagging and they choked on national television in front of millions of people. That's what we did.
I think every year, even go back to the 4 years, even in the BCS, there's only 3 to 4 teams that can win the whole thing. And again, TCU made it 4. TCU is not one of those 3 to 4 teams that could have won it all in 2022.
No,
this year, I would honestly say who can go finish the deal? Like Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and I think Georgia's a little TBD right now, depending on what the quarterback spot looks like.
Would you at least throw in with the healthy Jeremiah Love Notre Dame? Because we're going to talk about that.
I don't think Notre Dame can win the whole thing. I think they can beat Georgia. That's just my opinion. I think they can beat Georgia. I don't know if they could go win 2 more after that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a 2 to 3 team race. I say people may look at be like Texas. I feel like Texas though a little bit though can win when their quarterback doesn't have to be like a Superman type guy. They're a little more balanced at times when they can get that run game going. So I'd go with them. My second takeaway there, dude, I think everybody in the country totally doubted Ohio State off one game, just off the Michigan game. I think everybody was just picking Tennessee off that. I mean, Ohio State arguably is the best team in the country. I mean, when they were playing that well, when Will Howard was on like he was on last night. Now, again, that's a question mark I have with Ohio State. And maybe he doesn't have to play that well. I mean, only 2 damn incompletions. Like, he doesn't have to play that well. And a lot of it, he was killing the flats against Tim Banks. But can he just go be good for 3 more games? I have my questions. Can he? We know he can do it for 1 game, but now it's like, can you go do it for 3 games? But if that Ohio State team last night played, dude, I mean, they're not losing. They're going to beat Oregon next week.
They're not losing any game this year. They have a first-round bye. They're the #1 seed right now if they play that.
Yeah, I mean, no, this is a team that literally, I mean, it's a $20 million roster. From top to bottom, it's the best roster in college football. They were a motivated bunch. I mean, they'd heard for 2.5 weeks how their coach is about to get canned, how they were overrated. They wasted $20 million. And they came out, hit Tennessee in the face in a place that Tennessee fans were jacked, spent a lot of money, and we saw not take over the stadium, but had a good amount of 30,000, 40,000 Tennessee fans in there. But no, Ohio State flexed their muscles. That was one of the more dominating playoff performances against another good football team like Tennessee that I'd seen in probably potentially the playoff era. That was a dominant performance. And I don't think the home field advantage had really anything to do with it.
Not even a little.
If Ohio State played like they did last night, even in Neyland, they probably don't win 42-7, 41-17, but it's 30-34, 13-14. I mean, they handily win that. That was a dominant performance last night. And I think we all underestimated Ohio State just really off that Michigan game where they've admitted, Chip Kelly and Ryan Day have admitted they were a little arrogant in their play calling. They thought they could probably waltz in, hey, we're not losing these guys 4 times in a row. It's at home. They're not very good. We'll just go run it down their throat and flex our muscles and show them who daddy is. Okay. That didn't happen because those are their 2 best players, Mason Graham and the boys who hang out inside there. Just dumb play calling. If they did it again, they would do it differently. But, man, Ohio State, just a dominant performance across the board. I'm leaning to picking them this week.
It's very interesting, right?
But again, I'm trying to be – I feel like last week I was the one being like, hey, pump the brakes, people. Let's don't judge them on 1 game. I need to do the same too and not be the prisoner of the moment and go actually analyze that game from a 35,000-foot view.
Let me ask you. We've talked about Kirby having the Alabama problem because if we just watched him lose to Kalen DeBoer in his first season, it's not a Nick Saban thing. It's an Alabama thing. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the atmosphere, if it's the script day, if it's the fact that he came from Alabama. He just can't beat Bama. That's what it kind of feels like for Ohio State with Michigan. Because if they easily could win the national championship, if you put Georgia in the playoff last year, I still probably would have picked Georgia to win the whole thing. Like, they were that talented last year.
Yeah.
It may just be that. Like, it literally just may be, we can't get past Michigan. There's something about this team that always makes us show up with stage fright, but we can beat everybody else. And we're going to we're going to flex our muscles, and we're going to play a brand of football that absolutely is dominant against every single opponent. Final take for me. I heard all flack. I heard all the flack for months. I heard it from you. I heard it from Chris Phillips. I heard it from everybody at SEC Unfiltered. I heard it from people in the chat. I said 8 teams was the right number for the college football playoff. 8 would have been great. You would have had a home matchup. You would have had no buys. You would have had great atmospheres. You would have been able to say, look at where we are as a team. Look at what we have shown. Look at how much we get to host a playoff game and that the regular season matters. And I got pushback. No, we need 12. We need to.
I've never pushed back against an 18.
Chris pushed back. Chris pushed back against me.
Me.
My bad. I apologize, Dave. I apologize bringing you into our number.
Yeah, don't bring me in that street fight.
Tell me right now. 8 teams. Here are the 8. It's the 4 that got buys. It's Notre Dame. It's Ohio State. It's Texas. And it's Penn State. Anybody arguing with that those were the 8 most consistent teams in college football this year? Those were the 8 most. Because at the end of the day, you have 2 teams, one of which lost to the best team in college football and the second best team in the Big Ten. The other team that lost to the same team twice. And then you have Notre Dame that lost to NIU and beat the shit out of everybody else. And then Boise State, they get in. You did it for money. That's all you did.
Yeah,
we know that. And as soon as people start realizing that if you were the one that was excited about a 12-team playoff, and this is where I want to get to. If you were excited about a 12-team playoff, I'm not going to take anything away from you. It's your college football world. But what I don't want to hear is you guys complaining, coming back, and saying, but these games were so awful. These games were disgusting. Guys, it was always going to be that way. Like, that's the thing with Cinderella. Eventually, she turns back into a pumpkin. The reality comes in that there are just better teams than you, and you're going to get blowouts in every single matchup. Every single year, we're going to see this. Because if you wanted 12, you always wanted 12. And so now we're hearing people go back and say, well, these games weren't right. And we'll get into the argument about what is the best course of action moving forward. But this is the case. Based on what the College Football Playoff Committee showed us, if you did not want to see these blowout first-round matchups, you should have been on board with 8. You should have said the first round being at home in an atmosphere, the next round being at its next stage, and then going to the national championship and calling it even and start on New Year's Eve and give players more time to rest, recoup, put themselves in a better situation to be healthy. Do that. But you didn't want that. What you wanted was more representation because the College Football Playoff Committee wanted more money and they wanted more dollars and cents in their pocket, which is fine. But it's clear as day. The games that we got yesterday is why 8 was always the right number.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I think 8 is the right number. 12 is the max I can do. We inevitably know it's going to expand to 14, inevitably to 16. It is what it is. It's right. I think most people who kind of like the purity of the sport don't really like that. I see a lot of people pushing. They want the BCS back. I'm like, I don't really necessarily agree with that. I mean, our national championship this year would be who? Oregon, Georgia, which, I mean, we'd be fine. We may get that anyways. But I don't know. I want to see a little more than 2 teams. I will say that. I don't have the BCS formula if we went with the 12. But then my last one, we're going specific game here. Tennessee, Josh Heupel, road issues, dude. I mean,
it's a problem.
It's official. I've been saying it going into the year. Some Tennessee social media, Voldemort and the boys giving your guy flack about it not being a real thing. But we've seen it over the Heupel era, man. I mean, we've seen no shows in Athens in 2022. In 2023, they're up 13 against Alabama at half, get outscored 27-0 in the second half. And when I mean no shows, they're either no show for the whole game offensively or at least halves. We saw it last night in the first half, at least till the very end of the first half, against Ohio State, moving on into the second half. We saw it against Florida last year, too. Now, granted, Cooper Mays was out, but still a complete no-show. We saw it in Arkansas this year in Fayetteville. It's a legit issue here. And I really think it just comes down to a communication issue for them that they have to figure out in the offseason. I don't even think Tennessee fans can deny that he actually has a road game issue. And I understand road games are hard to win, but at this point against quality competition, it's gonna cost you games. And I think at this point, it's safe to say Tennessee has hit a ceiling with Josh Heupel, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're making the college football playoffs every year, that's a phenomenal season. There's teams.
I would say nobody's going to complain if you're making the playoffs every year.
No, I mean, that fan base ultimately will at some point. But, like, right now it's fine. But I just don't know if this program right now, and we'll talk about it in a bit, is set up to go win a championship, whether that's a Southeastern Conference title or that's a national championship right now, because I think they've been figured out a little bit offensively. He needs to get rid of the old good old boy network and bring in some new creative ideas. It's hit its stalemate, which after year 4, hey, maybe you need to push the reset button and change some things up.
Here's what I want to break down now. The College Football Playoff Committee is going to have evidence at this point that change needs to happen. And it may come very small. It may be for next year, we get rid of the automatic bids for conference champions. You get in, but you don't get the first round bye. Depending on what we see this upcoming in 2 weeks when Boise State takes on Penn State and Arizona State takes on Texas.
That's what I think it should be.
That might be the first thing that we see. They're going to have evidence now that we have to throw strength of schedule into the mix. They have to. Because of, yes, SMU, they have absolutely earned the respect, I think, of the college football world for what they did in year one of being a Power 4 program. They did. But then you also have to throw in a team like South Carolina that was the hottest team down the stretch. What they looked like, they had 4 ranked AP top 25 wins. They beat the ACC champions in their backyard, and they're going to go play in the Cheez-It Bowl against an Illinois team that has multiple players opting out. And they probably would have been a better matchup for Penn State. Ole Miss has a roster that is good enough to win a national championship and lose to Kentucky. Those are two things that are the same. Those are two things that are absolutely true. They have a team that was good enough to win a national championship, but also shoot itself in the foot consistently to where they would lose every single game where they didn't play perfect. They have an Alabama team. Alabama got skull-dragged by Oklahoma. They lost on the road to a Vandy squad where it was 85% Alabama fans in the building. They also beat the best team in college football in the SEC and the ASCC champions in their backyard and led at one point by 21. So
hey, here's a question. Do you think Indiana wins those 2 games at Vanderbilt and against Oklahoma?
I think they win one. I don't think they win both.
To be fair to say they split.
I think that they win one. But that's going to be a thing that we're going to have to argue at this point. Strength of schedule has to be a factor. Because if not, what you're going to get is you're going to get these games. And if you're going to continue to expand, I'm all for it if this is what you want to do. If you want to go all in on the money cash grab and not worry about games actually mattering, and you're going to have players that are opting out because they don't care, whatever it is, so be it. But make sure that you have to have this conversation now. What are you looking for? The 12 most deserving teams or the 12 best teams? Because of the product
makes me cringe hearing that.
Because the problem is that if you get the most deserving, so be it. The product is going to suffer. We watched it yesterday. Because here's the deal. I've gotten so much flack for a tweet that I posted about how Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss would have been a better game against Notre Dame. Would have been an absolutely much better game. They would have beaten the crap out of Indiana. I never once said they were deserving because they weren't. They had 3 losses. I'm not going to say you're deserving when you have 3 losses attached to your name. You don't deserve anything. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't be a better game. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be better for the product. That doesn't mean that it would have been a matchup that people would have probably tuned in for. You would have seen the front 7 of South Carolina going up against a Notre Dame offensive line. You would have seen an Alabama defense going toe-to-toe against Drew Aller, or Ole Miss's offense taking on James Franklin's defense. That would have been a game.
Yeah, I don't even know if Alabama would have beat Penn State. I'm not even saying that. I just think it would have been a better game.
I don't think that they would. Listen, they would not. If you want my honest opinion, they wouldn't have beaten Notre Dame. That's for dang sure.
No, yeah, I'm not even going out on a limb and saying they'd win either one of those games. I'd agree. I don't think that's a guaranteed dunk. Just like I don't think it's a dunk South Carolina or Ole Miss would guarantee to go win it either now on a day-to-day basis. You feel better, much better than Indiana and SMU showed.
But what would you rather see? What would be a better television product?
For sure.
So that's the thing.
It's not even like as fast as you asked me that question, I answered it even quicker. Like I was like, no, it's not even deserving to me is just like, well, it's fair. Like, come on, man. Like, they deserve to get in. It's like they went 11-1 in a Power 4 conference. It's like, that's a very surface level statement there. Let's pull back some layers and context and notice outside of Ohio State, they didn't play another Big Ten true contender on that schedule. Now, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They did dominate some competition. They did. But you could just tell by watching the eye test to me. And if we have a committee, I know people are like, it can't be subjective. If we don't want any subjectivity, we just might as well go to a BCS type format and let a computer spit out its rankings. If we have a committee, it's going to have people are going to be subjective. I mean, we're human beings. We all have things we weight a little more in our head, a little more through our experiences, watching the sport, being in the sport, knowing how things operate. So if we have a committee, it's going to be subjective. And to me, if I'm on a committee, my eyes are going to tell me a lot what's going on. And that's where I think you get the 12 best teams. Right? And
I'm not going to say that Indiana didn't belong based off the criteria, because Indiana was an 11-1 team that was able to win most of its conference games. If that's what the committee wants, then that's what the committee can stand by. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with SMU finding a way to get in if they come back down 17 in the ACC title game and that the conference championship should matter. I'm okay with that. But also, I'm going to sit here and give my honest opinion. You have to decide what's more important to you, the value of the games or the actual best 12 teams. Because
I'll say this, Bear, to your point, bringing up SMU, I think SMU's the third best team in the ACC.
Yeah, because the second best team was at home because they lost to Syracuse.
Yeah.
That's what
I think Miami would beat SMU. I mean, anytime SMU got away out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they were bad turnovers and penalties. Should have lost to Duke, man. And Manny Diaz's team was better than I was expecting this year. But still, no. It's like SMU was the third best team in the ACC this year behind Clemson and Miami. And that's where the deserving was, because it felt like a media rally on social media after they came back and still lost. We forget that, but it is what it is now.
At the end of the day, the college football playoff committee will have a lot to go off of. And that's the good news, is that this was the first year. We're going to learn. We're going to see growth. That's the only way that we can ever grow. As an individual, as a society, we have to learn from our mistakes. They're going to have to take into consideration that the games that you play, the quality of opponent that you go up against is going to matter. Or else they're just going to take the money, and what they're going to do is they're going to say, we don't care about the product on the field. We already got you to tune on in. We already got you to go ahead and pay attention to the games. So get over it. That's what we're going to see every single year. Where
after the dust settled, who do you have more of a problem with now? It got in SMU or Indiana?
SMU, to be completely honest, because of when you're giving up 14 points, really 21 points, but 2 on pick sixes in an environment when you didn't win your conference championship, then the same thing could be said if Jalen Milroe was playing. That's what we're saying at this point. The same thing could be said, and they played at least against a more quality schedule, and they also got a signature win over the SEC champions. The best thing that SMU has is a comeback victory against a comeback close call against Clemson, or a 3-point swing against the third best team in the Big 12. That's their resume this year.
And a Pitt team melted down the stretch.
And that's not an insult to what, again, Rhett Lashley has been doing this year. What it is it's the reality of, are we talking about the 12 best teams or the 12 most deserving teams? Because if you want the 12 most deserving, fine. SMU belongs in. So does Tennessee. So does Indiana. So does Clemson, because they won their conference. That does not mean that they were the best teams. And that's our point. Let's go ahead and talk about Texas. They get a signature win. They won by 14 points. Here's what I love. They were able to play a version of football that I think showed their true colors of who they are. I believe that Texas all year has been trying to play off the charade that they're an offense that is supposed to be high tempo, vertical passing. Let's just trust our offense to take flight when it comes to the deep shots down the field. Nah, you know what they are? They're a ram and bam, shut your mouth. Let's go ahead and establish the run to get the pass going identity. And guess what? When they ran the football with ease. Best of all, you saw what they could do when they have an explosive run game. If nobody could stop that run game, this is one of the best teams in college football. And they proved it on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is, and I give Sark credit here, because a lot of these coaches want to get in their bags and these scripted plays from just being in the buildings and want to seem like the smartest guy in the world and I out-schemed him, we scored there. Jimbo's a little bit like that. But I'll give him credit. Clemson was not great at stopping the outside zone run game all year. And, dude, they could not stop it yesterday, and he just kept going back to Blue and Wisner. And it's like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? When you can almost go for what they go, 270, 290 when I was looking at it this morning off the top of my head. Let's see. And I think that's factored in with sack yardage too. So I think it was the average more yards per carry than that. Yeah, 292, 6.1 yards, and that's even, I think, with added sack numbers there. So he's even better. But again, don't stop doing what's working, man. And again, I think sometimes these coaches outthink themselves. That's where I think Sark does a really good job of hey, man, you can't stop these 2 to 3 plays. I may change the formation to make it look a little different, but we're going to run the same scheme here. He does a phenomenal job at that. A little higher scoring game than I thought. Barely take it may have got out of hand a little bit there for a minute, but give Cade Klubnik credit. I thought he was really struggling like I thought he would in the first half. But give the kid credit. Glad to see a guy coming back to his hometown and actually performing pretty well. Always, for whatever reason, I always feel bad for a guy who goes back to his hometown playing an old form. Like what Michael Taft was his high school teammate, played against Makuba, and then he's familiar with a lot of those Texas guys, obviously. But I'm glad he got his stuff back together. He started playing well coming out of the second half, and had a chance to make it a one-score game late. I mean, Clemson came back and fought back in the second half. Was glad to see that. I think Texas's secondary a little more tested than we had seen throughout the regular season yesterday. Again, I mean, you go look how many backup quarterbacks they played this year. Again, I think two things can be true at once, like we say all the time. Texas's secondary's improved. I think, again, I'm an eye test guy. The eyes tell me that. There's no doubt about it. It may not be as good, though, heading into this game as we thought. And that doesn't mean they're bad or even average. It just means they're good. They may have a little more holes than we thought, just like a lot of people do on the back end because there's no depth. But I think Bryant Wesco didn't have a great game at times, but he came on a little bit more, I think they tested that secondary more so than they were tested all year because of Cade Klubnik. So that'll be a question. I don't think it'll be an issue for him in this Arizona State game, obviously, because Scadaboo's the guy they got to stop, and Sam Levitt, I don't think, can play to the level consistently that Klubnik did in the second half. I don't think they'll be challenged in this game, but if they get matched up with Oregon for sure, and potentially, depending on what Will Howard you get for Ohio State, could be tested and definitely at the receiver spot. I mean, we saw that yesterday. It'll be the best receivers Texas will face. So down the line, it may catch them. I think on January 1st, though, they'll be fine. But that may have been some glaring holes I could have taken away from that game. But again, impressive run game. Don't try to fix what's still working, fellas.
What I do love about this Texas offense and what the game plan was when Sark didn't want to get into his bag of tricks and try to switch things up, it showed you that they could have won. Like the score says, yeah, Clemson hung 24 points on this team. And that says a testament to Cade Klubnik's growth and his development, which I don't think that a lot of people paid attention to. He is such a hard analysis for this year because of when he was good, he may have been as good as Cam Ward in the ACC. He may have been the best quarterback in the ACC at times. When he was bad, it was awful. It was shield your eyes, hide the children. Don't go ahead and have a single glaring moment to watch them because of it was just unobtainable. But still, the thing that I love about Texas, they lost multiple offensive linemen. You never would have known a difference. I mean, they lost their starting, they lost Williams. A play later, Jake Majors goes out on a pick. Guess what? Guys come on in. Gooseby makes a big time play. They don't miss a beat. And when Sark finally got back to, hey, this game's a little bit too close for comfort, let's trust our ground game. Jaden Blue, off to the races, 77-yard touchdown. Look at that. We got a 14-point lead. We're back in control. They did such a good job of, I think, putting together an offense and a game plan that allowed Quinn Ewers to play in his own element without feeling too much of a pressure. And if that's the version of Quinn Ewers that I'm going to get, I'm not complaining. I don't think any Texas fan should complain. If I'm getting a completion percentage roughly around 65 to 70%, over 200 passing yards, 1 touchdown, the interception, again, not really on him. That was a really bad break because of just the ball bounced off of DeAndre Moore's chest and into the arms of a defender. Outside of that, if you give me that and I get this consistent run game with Gibson, with Wisner, with Jaden Blue, who's not having a fumbling issue, I'm getting 2-3 touchdowns on the ground, I take that. I think that, again, this is the version of Texas offensively that if you just trust, it's like a Ram 4 truck. It's built Texas tough. Like you are just all in, boom, pedal to the metal. And you get that version, I think that that's a team that can hold its own against anybody in the college football playoff because their defense is good enough. And that's where I think that we got to give credit. Real fast, I just want to give credit to, again, what we saw from this growth of Clemson's offense. Because they always had the talent. People don't want to talk about that. People want to act like Clemson was this bad team. Clemson's been a top 15 recruiting squad for years. They went out and they brought in Chris Rump and they brought out Matt Luke and they brought in some other coaches this offseason that truly, I think, bettered the overall persona of the team. And they're going to be a threat next year. I think that you saw the growth of when they took away the rushing attack for Texas. For Clemson, they had to trust their passing game. They had to be able to make some plays. You watch this. TJ Moore had a good game. You watch this. Antonio Williams had a good game. I thought Bryant Wesco had a decent game. Overall, I couldn't be upset if I am a Clemson fan at what the offense is doing. I can be very upset about what the defense looks like moving forward because that was a bad point.
Clemson looked a little bit like a younger version of what they used to look like. For a while, for a 3 or 4 year span, they had no skill guys outside of all Dabo's Alabama walk-ons buddies kids lining up in the X. Like, I mean, that's what it was for a little bit. But you got Bryant Wesco. You mentioned TJ Moore. Those are the guys, Antonio Williams. Those are the guys that are the Mike Williams of the world over there.
They haven't had that in years either.
No, but when they were in their prime, you could always count on one thing. They had a good quarterback from Taj Boyd all the way to Trevor Lawrence. They had a quarterback, skill guys, and they had defensive linemen. The offensive line was always just to me. I mean, it was good enough to win a national championship, but it wasn't the strength of the team. It looks like they can build on that a little bit now with some young depth. You're right. Texas, I think. I mean, Clemson wasn't great at stopping the run a lot this year at all. So that's why I'm a little bit like, give Sark credit for going back to what worked. And I think this next game, they'll be fine. I think that's going to be a blowout. I think they'll be fine in that. It's going to be if they face Ohio State potentially and Jim Knowles. I thought Jim Knowles had a phenomenal game plan last night with Heupel and Nico, making Nico make tough decisions at times. Which is, at times, Nico can have that slow blinker. What I mean by that, he's a little slower on the mental, cerebral side of things. I always just call it he had a slow blinker. But I think for Jim Knowles, and if they were to face Texas, they're going to take outside that. They're going to take away that outside zone run scheme there, and and they will make Quinn Ewers have to put the weight of the shoulder of it on him to go win that game. That's where I get a little I don't know. But I think Texas had two good matchups right off the bat. Obviously finished Clemson off. And I think this week's a very good matchup for them again.
Listen, there's a formula that makes them an impossible team to beat, in my opinion. Stop the run, force your quarterback to pass. And honestly, I think Kate Klubnik is a better passer than Sam Levitt. I think Sam Levitt currently is playing mind out of his freaking mind. He's a psycho on bath salts kind of mentality right now. But if you can stop Cam Scatterbo, I think the wide receivers at Clemson are better than the wide receivers at Arizona State, to where it could be
Arizona State's best guys out.
Right, exactly. It could be a matchup to where it's very similar, where if you allow Sam Levitt to start gaining a bit of momentum, maybe he's able to make this thing close. But once again, the play calling's got to be better. Like Garrett Riley, you have a 4th down and 1, and you know that Texas's defensive line is its strength. Why the hell are you running it up the gut? Why the hell are you trying to beat power on power against this defensive line? They got dudes that would start for Clemson tomorrow. They got dudes that would start at places like Michigan or Penn State. Like, it's not just Texas has a good defense. They have elite players that were properly developed this year. And that was your play call. If Texas can do that against teams like Michigan, against teams like Ohio State, against teams like Arizona State, against teams like Oregon, as long as their pass defense can make plays, it's going to be a dogfight. It's 100% going to be a dogfight.
Yeah, no, I agree. But Barry, I'm bringing in just a quick question. I think it's a good question real fast. I'm good with the Texas one. I just bring up the point. My concern and the run game, phenomenal yesterday. If you can't stop that outside zone run scheme, Texas is going to light you up. It may not be explosive because I think Sark does. Quinn Ewers just scares me because he's not an anticipatory thrower. He's not that's what he doesn't anticipate to throw the ball, doesn't anticipate to throw people open. That concerns
No, but if that's the version that I'm getting, I'm not complaining. Like, I'm okay with him.
No, but I think a lot of that has to do because they got that run game going. And that's what would scare me is if a defense, and again, they're going to be fine against Arizona State. It's just as we get further and further in these playoffs, if someone takes that away, like Georgia had, like, then the weight of the entire game's on Quinn Ewers, and I don't really like that. I don't know. Maybe it's just a me thing.
I don't think it's a you thing. I think that the other thing that's really important is the play calling. Because remember, there was multiple moments where you just felt like, why is Sark deciding to go with that kind of scheme? And you know, like if you go back to sometimes establishing the run, there have been multiple times this year where teams, not just Texas, but multiple teams have gone away from trying to build the run. Establish something on the ground that has been your backbone. If you can, even if you don't sustain it, you're putting yourself in a position to where it's going to open you up. And guess what? When they finally got back to the run game, what happened? They averaged 6 yards a play. And again, this is not the same defense that we knew underneath Dabo Swinney back in the 2010s. Like, they do not have guys like a Christian Wilkins or a Dexter Lawrence. They gave up, like, they ranked 78th in the country in rushing this year. Like, they gave up 139 yards per game. This was expected, the ground game. What wasn't expected was when they decided to go to the pass or when they decided to make some really errant calls, Clemson came fighting back. And that's, I think, a testament to Clemson. That's a testament to Dabo. That's a testament to the growth of guys that you expect to be household names this time next year. But still, Texas kind of allowed a team like Clemson to get a little bit comfortable. And what happened? The second they said, all right, let's go back to the ground game. Oh, look, we're up by 14. Once again, look at that. We're in control of this game. We're going to trust our defense. We're going to put ourselves in a great situation. Look at where we are. Now we're going to go play in the in the Peach Bowl against an Arizona State team that many of us still do not think for 1 second is as good.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on Texas. I think they got a good match. I'm the most confident in them this upcoming on January 1st. That's my most confident going in the quarters.
Let's go ahead and talk about what we saw out of the shoe yesterday. Wow. Credit to Rocky Top. And not credit to the actual on-field performance. That was stupid. That was awful. That was shield your eyes and hide the children bad. Like, throw a TVMA logo up there when you watch that game. It was terrible. But credit to the fans. I have never seen a fan base actually do what they did. Like, the fact that you were able to go watch as they were stockpiling on in and they were making their droves, and then you saw a couple of scarlet and gray, and you saw some of that red kind of casting through, and there was some orange. And there was some more orange. And you're like, oh, well, that's going to cover up. And then you hear, 30,000 fans made the trip up from Knoxville. Like, give a lot of credit. That's a fan base that has been waiting for this moment.
Yeah.
That's a fan base that has been
since 2007. And
they are an undefeated fan base. Like, when you put them in the SEC, at this point, I think that it starts with Tennessee. Because if I'm not sure you're going to see many fan bases do what Tennessee just did. However, the on-field play did not match what was the off-field play. It was awful. It was you knew from the very beginning when they said Dylan Sampson was dealing with a hamstring injury. He was going to be probably very limited. Yeah, you knew at that point this game was probably out of reach.
Yeah, I see, again, not calling him out. I think he did an all-time voice for me growing up on CBS, Tim Brando. I think he does a great job, but I kept seeing him post, I thought this was a great matchup for Tennessee. I just didn't see that. I mean, if you follow Tennessee at all in the Heupel era, the offense doesn't travel on the road, folks. The show does not leave Neyland Stadium for the most part, outside of the 2022 season, and even they had a game in Athens where they were a no-show. I don't know. The disappointing part would be if I was a Tennessee fan, the defensive line. It was their worst game of the season, and let's be honest, we said it each week, or at least every preview I was doing of them. The defensive line was slowly regressing a little bit. And I love Rodney Gardner. Worked with him at Auburn. Does a phenomenal job. He developed. That's the most developed room Tennessee's had since Josh Heupel got there in 2021. That group underachieved yesterday, especially when you factor in Ohio State was playing with a backup center.
Yeah.
Who had snapping issues against Michigan. That's where I think a lot of people thought Tennessee had the mismatch advantage there. And I would agree. I didn't think it was going to be like that. I thought Tennessee would have more success. And I mean, who knows? Maybe the game has a little different momentum if the first face mask on the sack doesn't get called by Bryson Easton. Again, that doesn't change the game. Ohio State was going to win that game. I picked Ohio State to win. I liked Ohio State in this one. But I don't know. The Tennessee offense is just so uncreative right now. And it takes special players on the outside that you just can't scheme against where they can just get a matchup like Jalen Hyatt against a safety. There's nothing you can do about it. They don't have that. They also don't mix around like they used to with Princeton Fan at the tight end spot. It's like once Alex Golesh left, I'd love to hear the Tennessee fans' comments in this. Since Alex Golesh has left after what, the 22 season? Yeah, because he's been at South Florida now for 2 years, 23, 24. The lack of creativity is just gone. And I don't know if Joey Hazel, their offensive coordinator, who's essentially been Heupel's GA his entire life, just brought him with him every time, which is a conversation for another day. Just hasn't been as creative as Golesh. I don't know. Tennessee just doesn't travel on the road. And like I mentioned in my three biggest thoughts, I was so impressed with Ohio State. I thought Ohio State would win. I did not think they'd dominate like that. But that is the best team in the country if they play that every week. Now, will they? If the quarterback spot, I don't know. I would lean towards not that well. Only 2 incompletions. But, man, Ohio State dominated. Tennessee's got to go back to the drawing board. Is it bad, Tennessee fans? No. You're going to take a 10-2 playoff appearance, or I should say a 10-3 season now, and a playoff appearance every year. I think you would agree with that, Barry. Every year. But at some point, Tennessee's a very proud program that is a blue blood program in the SEC. They will get tired of, hey, no showing. Again, it was only one time in the playoffs for the first 12 teams. But no, I mean, just disappointing performance for Tennessee. But, man, Ohio State trajectory up right now.
Dave, what would you believe more? That Tennessee with that defensive line had 0 sacks going up against 2 backup offensive linemen, or that Will Howard was going to throw for over 300 yards? I'll stop you. Both happened yesterday.
Yeah, no, I mean, Will Howard was phenomenal outside of the one interception.
Which would you believe, though? Which would you believe? The 0 sacks or the 300 passing yards?
300 passing, probably.
I would not believe for a second that they did not get a single sack on the day. I would never have.
That was the most underwhelming performing unit for Tennessee that you're like, man, they were usually consistent. And again, they've been kind of trending. If you go back and look at their rushing numbers against Mississippi State, Kentucky, I'd have to go look at the Vanderbilt one off the top of my head. But to be fair, it's a system thing. Vanderbilt likes to run the football a lot. But they've been kind of trending down if you went and looked at it. But I didn't expect that, especially with a backup center and Seth McLaughlin being out. And you see him, I had the cigar at the end of the game. And then Tennessee, they have no playmakers on the outside of the ball right now. They've no outside of Brew McCoy's like the only kid you can trust out there. I think they had to pay Squirrel White to even travel to this game. So he came up limping like he does every game. I'm sure I get exhausted seeing it. I'm sure Tennessee fans do.
Listen, I don't want to hear from any Big Ten fans that Jeremiah Smith is a great Big Ten receiver. Like, you're going to learn what he is just an anomaly. Like, this is single-handedly this is not the same level of elite that we said about Marvin Harrison Jr. when he was coming out. He's only going to get better. Like, if you gave me an opportunity, if you gave me an opportunity tomorrow to draft a player and just put him in the NFL, Travis Hunter would be number 1. Jeremiah Smith would be a close number 2. Like, he is just phenomenal. The fact that he was winning, it was literally surgical. It was a thing of art. It wasn't a Big Ten thing. It wasn't an SEC thing. That back shoulder throw from Will Howard to Jeremiah Smith into the end zone against McCoy, those are things that you just look at and say, college football at its finest. And the fact is that he is only going to improve. He is going to be one of the most nuanced playmakers in college football. He, by this time next year, may be the best player in the sport. Yeah, he may be the first wide receiver since Devonta Smith. Clear-cut wide receiver. Not Travis Hunter both ways. He is the first clear-cut guy that may win the Heisman Trophy.
I mean, he's got a higher upside than Devonta just because he's thicker and got a bigger frame. I mean, it's not even close.
And the fact was that they were able to utilize him and put pressure on Tennessee's defense. Tim Banks having to now double-team him. And guess what it did? It opened up the passing attack for Emeka Egbuka. Want to know why? Because he finished with 81 yards. It opened up the passing attack on the swing pattern. That wheel route, that was phenomenal. The wheel route that had been a problem for Tennessee to guard all year, they utilized it. Travion Henderson finished with like 54 receiving yards. And by the way, GOJ, I know that you in the comments section, congratulations, I'm not paying attention to you, but I know that wide receivers come out of Columbus, Ohio. But this is a kid that would have been successful anywhere. He would have been successful at LSU. He would have been successful at Alabama. He would have been successful at Michigan. He would have been successful at Oregon. He's just a 101. Like, that's how talented he is. That's how freaking amazing of a player that he can be. And they were able to slice apart this Tennessee defense left and right.
They really just gave out. It was Tim Banks' flaws in that defense are in the flats, and they just took advantage of what were given to them. And again, Tennessee, let's be honest here, this is the first game where they were kind of faced a whole group of receivers that could take advantage of them. And it was like, even watching on the phone, dude, you could see they could not keep up with the motions Ohio State and Chip Kelly were running. Like Jeremiah Thielander, the linebacker, couldn't keep up with them. Christian Harrison, DBs couldn't keep up. I mean, in Tennessee, second safeties are not very good right now. A lack of athleticism really in the back end, and Ohio State took advantage of that. It was an overall phenomenal game plan on both sides of the football by Ohio State.
No, the other thing that's really, really big here is that they've had some issues at that second level of the defense for Tennessee since Peely went out. And as soon as you saw the advantages, guess what? Ohio State saw it, went after it. So, cool. And here's the other part that I really, really appreciate. Ohio State finally stopped doing what they needed to do, what they should have done against Michigan. Ohio State wanted to show that they were the more physical, imposing team. That's not their bread and butter. They're a finesse team. They have wide receivers. They have playmakers that can easily pick apart secondaries left and right. Guess what? They did. They picked apart one that hadn't really been tested, but one that when it was tested, did its job. Did its job all year. But really, I'm looking right now at this offense. If you give me this every single week, what the hell are we going to say about Ohio State if they win the national championship? They just decided not to show up against Michigan because this was the offense that put a beat Oregon. They lost by a point. And they lost by a point to where they didn't get the timeout off on time. That was it.
Yeah.
And besides that, if you win with finesse and flash and you get Carnell Tate involved and you get Jeremiah Smith involved, and you get Emeka Ibuka involved in this run game, and the offensive line is creating opportunities, and Will Howard's playing like this, like the greatest show on turf reincarnated out in Columbus, that's a team that has everything going for it, and its defense is going to shut down every single person.
Well, we'll say last night I would think Taj Lapoy and Dan Lanning's game plan this week. I would have to go rewatch the Oregon-Ohio State game for the first time. They're not going to give up the flats like that again. Because you look at the stat line for Will Howard, and it's, 2 incompletions. So it's kind of like, all right, you weren't really stretching the field. I think if I was a DC, Dan Lanning and Taj Lapoy, I have my own opinions on, but Dan Lanning's a good defensive mind. They're going to make him be like, let's see if you can do it again. Like, and we're not going to give you the flats. Can you go? You may hit us on a few, but can you consistently hit us downfield vertically? I think they can. Will Howard be able to do it? I don't know. I think
he did it against him. He did it against him in Austin. He had 326 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. So he already did it once.
I would see if you could do it again. That's my point. His issue's been consistency. So that's why I think I would go back and be like, it's like a basketball game, dude. It's like, I don't know if that guy can go 7 for 10 from 3 again. I don't know if he can shoot 70% from beyond the arc.
No, but when you're able to go ahead and convert on 65% of your third downs, when you're able to live in second and manageable, when you're able to utilize your run to set the pass, when you put so much pressure on Jeremiah Smith that then you leave Emeka Ibuka open, then you leave the flats open for a guy like Travion Henderson to get 20 yards, and then you have to go back to covering them, and it's one-on-one coverage against a guy who is already better than most cornerbacks in the SEC. It's a recipe to where you're down 21-0, and honestly, no one should be shocked. Like, honestly, no one should have been shocked. And I'm ashamed of it because I was completely wrong because I thought this was going to be a defensive bout, bully type of football where Nico, you're going to have to start growing up in front of our eyes. And I give a lot of credit to Nico. The fact that he was the only part of the offense that had any bit of success, like that to me is where we can say there's something that you get to be proud of. The other thing is you watch as he is probably shown you that there's more to meet the eye with his level of skill. But you can't win in college football by yourself. But guess what? Ohio State learned that last year. And this goes right back to what I said at the start of the offseason. Ohio State is all in on 2024. They were always going to be all in on 2024. They made it clear they were going to be in on 2024. How much money they spent in the NIL for players to come back. How much money they spent to bring in guys that they didn't need. They just wanted. They didn't need a Quinshon Judkins. They didn't need a Caleb Downs. They wanted them because they didn't want to leave any stone unturned. They wanted to go bring in Will Howard because they wanted a better offensive identity compared to what they have with Kyle McCord. And when that team that shows up looks like as they did yesterday, very hard to beat. Tennessee has a lot that they have to look forward to. They have a lot they have to fix. There's so many things that right now, when I pinpoint what needs to change out in Knoxville for them to reach their level. Because you brought this up earlier. You said that they've reached a ceiling with Josh Heupel. I don't think that that's entirely true. I think the ceiling is that they're not able to get to the national championship. I think if they could get to the semis or maybe the quarters, they can win a playoff game. But that's where I kind of draw the line. I don't think
that's why I'm asking you the question I posed on Twitter last night, Barrett. Will Josh Heupel win a championship of any kind at Tennessee?
Does he make any changes?
Or national?
Does he make any changes to the offense?
It's up to you. It's your interpretation. I'm asking.
If he doesn't, then no. Then no. Because of you brought this up for now 2 years. It feels like the offense has been very predictable in different ways since Alex Golesh left. They got to bring someone in just to, I think, finite it. Like, imagine having a second person read over your term paper. That's what you need. Just somebody to make sure that they can check off all the minor little boxes and guarantee that everything is going according to plan. Because it was stale. And you want to know what was so interesting? Jim Knowles sniffed out what the play design was going to be within the first 6 drives. Within the first 6 plays. He knew exactly which way Nico was going to throw. He knew exactly which way the run was going to happen. He basically put Tennessee behind the sticks to where they couldn't get even their bag of tricks as they wanted to. And then, because they were down by so much, they forced them to pass. They forced them to have the play.
They couldn't get in the run game. And I think to Knowles' credit, he was saying, hey, I think we can stop the run with 6. And then obviously, let's be honest, the Dylan Sampson injury helped that. And what we talked about it all season going into it, at least. I like Dylan Sampson, but I thought at some point in the year, depth was going to have to help Tennessee out at the running back spot because you couldn't just give this kid 25, 30 carries. His frame isn't really built for that if you've ever seen him in person. He's kind of an undersized kid. That's what I was like, maybe did that catch up to him in the worst spot? I don't know. Maybe it's something to think about there. And on the last Nico point before we move on, Nico, I don't think anyone can deny this. I think Helen Keller can tell you this. I think everyone can see the raw ability, the physical ability of Nico Iamaleava. I think we can all see that and say that. My thing is the cerebral side of this. Like that never really got better as the season got on. Yeah, was there a couple drives here and there? Yeah, the second half against Alabama, yeah. But like you missed so much in the first half against Alabama that it kind of just evened out. We never really saw him take that next step this year, and that kind of concerns me a little bit. It just kind of concerns me from a Joey Hazel standpoint, from a Josh Heupel standpoint. Like, how can you get this guy thinking? Because your offense isn't hard, dude. It's a very just old school Art Briles spread out. We're hashed from Knoxville to Nashville, like our splits Knoxville to Nashville. Like, it's not a hard offense to comprehend. No one's denying Nico's physical ability or athletic ability. I don't know how you could do that. It's the cerebral side of things. Next year, massive year for him. Again, not all his fault. You got to give him some weapons, and offensive line's got to be better across the board there.
By the way, we got over 500 people watching right now. If you just don't mind, hit the like button. Go ahead and hit subscribe while you're at it too. Takes 2 seconds. Guess what? Helps out the channel. We're on the race to 20,000 subscribers. It would be great to close out 2024 and begin 2025 at 20K. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, Big Ten fans, ACC fans about the channel, because we talk college football. And when you beat the crap out of the SEC, we're going to talk positively about your conference too. So make sure you just do it. Takes literally 2 seconds. Go ahead, get the ring notification as well, and a thumbs up to the video. Dave, let's try to go ahead and fix Tennessee moving forward. But before we do that, real quickly, give a grade on the year. What is Tennessee's 2024 season? They went to the playoff. They got to 10 wins. Nico, as you heard on the broadcast, because they had nothing else positive to talk about, they got to double-digit victories the first time a freshman's done that since Peyton Manning. But what do you give it?
Go a B plus. A B plus, almost down to. I think you can make an argument for a B after last night's performance a little bit. You were 10-2, now you're 10-3. I mean, made a playoff appearance in the first year. I thought 10-2 was the realistic goal for Tennessee this year, and I think they should have hit that with the schedule. Because let's be honest, if you played in the SEC this year, Kentucky and Vanderbilt on the same schedule, you got a schedule benefit. Is there an easy schedule in the SEC? No. Was there like an Indiana Big Ten schedule? No. Well, Texas was caused by. Texas is a good football team, but the schedule wasn't overly daunting in the league. Two things can be true at once. But I think Tennessee's schedule wasn't that difficult either. Their best win was Alabama, when Alabama played probably their worst game of the season outside Oklahoma. It was an ugly Alabama game. Tennessee didn't score in the first half. We talked about it all offseason, or we all talked about it all throughout the season, Bear. Even till now, Tennessee never played that complete game where you're like, yeah, look at that team, man. I like that momentum. They dominated really from start to finish. They never had a game like Ohio State had last night. Again, that's high expectations. But even Alabama had games where you looked like they were like, all right, there you go. That's your ceiling right there. I've seen it first half Georgia, the LSU game. You're seeing that. You've seen it with Georgia. You've seen it with South Carolina. You've seen it with Texas at times. Again, not an overly tough schedule, but Tennessee, you just never saw that complete game. You never saw Nico's full maturation process from week to week. You make the college football playoffs, though, in the first 12 team, you win 10 games. I'm going to give you a B plus, though, but I wouldn't hate it if you gave him a B.
I gave him a B last night. Your offense was too predictable because it was very clear if you could not win with the ground game with Dylan Sampson and your defense getting you out of trouble, you were going to lose. Look back at the game against Arkansas. What was the big thing? They couldn't establish any offensive identity with the passing attack. And partially that was on Nico, and partially that was on the wide receivers dropping balls. Look back at the first half of the Alabama game. You had 2 interceptions. You had 2 heinous interceptions, including one in the red zone. You couldn't pass the football. You could run it, but you couldn't pass it. What happened in the second half? Got a couple deep shots down the field, set up the run game. Dante Thornton stepped up really big. Chris Browser had a couple of big-time grabs. You won the football game. What about the game against Georgia? Your run game was established early on when you couldn't get the ball rolling on the ground anymore. The defense gave up points to Oscar Delp. You couldn't pass. Your wide receivers were dropping balls left and right. You lost the football game by double digits. So it was very clear how you could beat Tennessee. It was abundantly clear that there were issues on the offensive line. There were issues in the secondary that were probably not being pertained to enough. And there were issues when it came to the overall demeanor of what this team was. And they benefited the way that a team like Texas did, the way a team like Indiana did, and the way the team like SMU did, where their schedule boded well enough in their favor, where they got a signature win at the right time against an Alabama squad, to where it didn't matter if they lost to an Arkansas because they would have been fine at 10-2 to get in the playoff. They had an elite defense. They had a playmaker that absolutely deserved Offensive Player of the Year in the conference in Dylan Sampson. It sucks that we didn't get to see him at full speed last night, but I'm just going to say the quiet part out loud for any Rocky Top fan that's in here. I'm sorry. They never were going to win that game. Even if you had Dylan Sampson running 1,000 miles a minute, they were still going to lose. They were still going to lose by double digits. They were going to have its issues. It always was going to be that way. And with Texas at least put together a 4-quarter performance multiple times offensively to where you had no doubt they were absolutely going to be a dominant force, even though the schedule didn't bode well in their favor to show it. They were going to be a good team. Tennessee didn't do that. So Tennessee for me is a B. Tennessee for me is a solid B. All right, let's go ahead and try to fix the Volunteers moving forward. We have 5 moves that we want to see made this offseason, whether it be position moves, whether it be coaching searches. Dave, I'll let you go first.
I mean, this is kind of a wholeheartedly one here. I mean, Heupel's got to go take a 35,000-foot view of this program, and it's probably a good year to do it. After year 4, let's do some house cleanup. Let's see what we can adjust, make the front lawn look good now. It's time to change up some stuff in the spring. I saw they got back at like 5 a.m. last night. They were in the office working on the roster at 9 a.m. So, I mean, they're getting after it. They know what they got to get fixed. But, man, something's got to step. So, I think it is something to it now. I think since Alex Golish has left, that's a real thing. I don't know if I know he probably loves Joey Hazel, but something's got to change. Nico, from a cerebral standpoint, has to get better from that perspective. I think you got to go evaluate potentially your special teams guy, and I love him. I love him to death. Worked with him twice. Mike Eckler, got to go reevaluate that. I think he's on his last year of his contract. I think Willie Martinez, the secondary coach, last year of his contract. Tim Banks, last year of his contract. And again, that's tough to evaluate. They had a good overall year. You said elite. I wouldn't have termed them an elite defense because the back end I don't think was ever great. It's improved, but it was great. I don't think Tim Banks is worth losing his job over, though, after one performance last night. I think they did enough in a 13-game sample size to prove he should probably get a 2-3-year extension there. I mean, I think they were pretty good. They've been building that. I just think you got to go take a step back, man, and be like, why am I figured out now since 2020, since really 2023? It's not just a Joe Milton thing now, folks. It's not just, you can't just blame Joe Milton. This is an entire offensive production problem in all positions.
And the crazy part was
you got to go open the hood and figure out what's going on there. That's the first thing I'm doing if I'm Josh Heupel. Obviously, then improving the roster right now.
The crazy part, and I'm going to just tell you right now, that's on the list, but I'm going based off of order of actual value for me right now. Number 5 for me is bringing a veteran cornerback. I mean, you just got to bring in, I think, somebody that has a little bit more experience because, yes, you're going to have Jamal McCoy back. He was phenomenal this season. Did not look good against Jeremiah Smith. He got dog rocked. I mean, dude got beat bad multiple times. You have Boo Carter. You have some young guys like you have some young guys like
Boo Carter has not been great.
No, you got some young guys like Ricky Gibson. You got Colin Brazel. You got who else you have? Marcus Greer. You need to bring in somebody like just a veteran cornerback that can be the enforcer at the middle part of the field. You got to have that dude that is not afraid to go one-on-one against some of these wide receivers. Because whether or not we're talking about going up against a Jeremiah Smith or a Tez Johnson, if you were to advance to the next stage, you're going to face off against really good players next year. You're facing off against Ryan Williams next year. You're facing off against a guy that just added in Isaiah Horton to Alabama next year. There's going to be a dude that breaks out for Arkansas. You're facing off against a guy in Florida. They're going to bring in a difference maker. You got Trey Wilson. You got the kid that's coming on in who just left Oregon, Dallas Wilson. So you got to bring in, I think, a number 1 corner or at least a guy that can be complementary to Jamal McCoy. You can't have this secondary because I just feel like there was so much meat left on the bone because they knew that they didn't have another dude. They knew that they had number 3. They had to have somebody else. They don't have it right now.
No, Barry, you say Arkansas, and I was talking to them a little bit today. Yeah, you say they may have a secondary or a wide receiver step up. I don't know. They're not willing to pay anybody. But my next one, speaking of wide
Kentucky, Kendrick Law. I mean, you got that dude next year that you're facing off against.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky outbidded Arkansas for Kendrick Law. It's unbelievable. But I'm going to go wide receivers here, just wide receiver. I mean, Brew McCoy is the only guy you had that you really could consistently trust. And Chris Brazzell, the Tulane transfer, really did nothing this year. I mean, really did nothing. Squirrel White, what you get, though, when you bring in little slot receivers a lot. They get banged up, and Tennessee likes to do an extension of their run game. They have him at the point sometimes, which I don't get. They got to go at Chaz Nimrod's entering the portal. Dante Thornton's been banged up. Mike Matthews, I saw they were talking about maybe moving him to safety at some point, but I don't know why he can't get any run at the receiver spot because they're not great there, which is really confusing. At least
that would be the dumbest thing I could see right now.
Hell, he may be forward if he can get on the field. But no, I mean, to your point, then bringing in somebody from the secondary, they got to bring somebody in from the portal, and it doesn't really seem like they are. And from reading and doing some research on them, it looks like they're taking an approach trying to retain the roster from a salary cap standpoint. They're trying to retain a lot of these guys. I'm like, dude, if you go overpay for Squirrel Williams, you should be fired. You should be fired. No one on. I'm going out on a statement here. No one on Tennessee's offense this year, Nico included, which he's already been heavily paid. No one on that offense this year deserved a pay raise. I think that's fair. If anybody wants to argue with me, I would love to hear some names in the comments. Who on Tennessee's offense deserves a pay raise off their performance in a 13-game sample size? I don't think anybody, but you have to go, like you said, I gave my opinion on Nico. I think it's the maturation process from a cerebral side of things that diagnosing defenses has to improve, but also you got to help him out with a skill position player. And Tennessee hadn't had a consistent guy the last 2 years. I mean, they really haven't since Jalen Hyatt and the boys left. But I definitely a wide receiver. They got to go get somebody. And they're a little late to the dance a little right now there.
Number 4, I go running back. And the reason why is because Dylan Sampson's going to go pro. Like you would be foolish to come back for another year after winning SEC Offensive Player of the Year, breaking a school record and rushing touchdowns, being one of the greatest performances we have seen in Rocky Top in a hot minute, single-handedly beating Florida. I mean, like, you would be foolish to come back for another season at this point. I trust that Deshaun Bishop can be that guy. I trust that you can get more growth from Peyton Lewis. But somebody brought this up in the comments section. I know who you are. I'm blanking on your name. If you're going to run it 25 times a game, 35 times a game, you got to have a third dude. You got to, GOJ, my apologies. Thank you. You got to have a third dude, and you got to have a veteran. You got to have somebody that can be that enforcer that can tote the rock. And I'm not saying that he has to be a guy that is proven at the SEC or the Big Ten level or even a Pac-12. Like, you don't even do that. You can bring in a MAC dude, but you got to bring in somebody, because if you're going to run it 30 to 40 times a game, you know that his body is going to break down at some point. And what was the problem? He was playing hurt going into this game. The hamstring popped up, and their backbone of the offense was just rushing the football and taking pressure off of Nico, went away, and Nico had to throw. And at that point, the game was over. And that will happen to you against a team like Kentucky. That can happen to you against an improved Florida squad. That can happen to you against an improved Alabama squad. You can't afford that next year. So you got to bring in, I think, a veteran running back with somebody who can be a third complementary piece to what you have in Bishop and Lewis coming back in 2025.
Yeah, I think in one of my preseason videos, my 3 biggest concerns for Tennessee was running back depth after Sampson, because last year they were loaded. They were the exact opposite with Jalen Wright and them. I mean,
yeah.
So
Jabari Small fell off the face of the earth, and he would have started for several schools.
Yeah, he'd have been right behind Sampson this year. No, my next one, Barrett, again, mine aren't in any particular order when we were doing this. You mentioned the secondary some, so I'm not going to go along with this. It's the safeties. It's really not really the corners for me. Like, Will Brooks is their most consistent one, had a great pick last night. Like, Will Brooks should be a role player for you. I shouldn't be sitting here and being like, man, when I think of Tennessee safeties, when they're trying to go win a college football national championship, Will Brooks is what sticks out to me at safety. That shouldn't be the case, man. Like, Andre Turrentine was just very average here. Christian Charles, I saw enter the portal, wasn't great. Jacoby Thomas, the Middle Tennessee State transfer, never really panned out. You got what you got from Jermon McCoy, probably the best secondary player Tennessee's had. Call me crazy, people in the comments, but this is how bad these secondaries have been in the past. I take that back. I might go that. It's probably since Alante Taylor, who now plays for the New Orleans Saints. Probably since then. But no, they got to improve that back end, and especially the safety spot, because no one scares you on that back end. And I think Ohio State was probably salivating a little bit outside of the easy just flats. that Tim Banks was willing to give Will Howard. You had matchups on the safeties, and I think a lot of people, if they had the quarterback who could take advantage of it, and I'm kind of looking at Jalen Milroe, who had probably his worst game ever against Tennessee.
Single-handedly, that was his worst game.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't take advantage of it. But if you had a decent quarterback and some guys that could get on some matchups against Tennessee safeties this year, you could have taken advantage of it. But like I said, when you play Mississippi State, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt this year, you don't really get tested through the air.
Number 3, get David Sampson Jr. up to speed, like tomorrow. Literally have him already in the workout regimen, have him doing whatever he has to back home, have him learning all the ins and outs of what this offensive identity is going to be, because that offensive line was a turnstile yesterday. I mean, and don't get me wrong, Ohio State is one of the best defensive fronts in college football. It was bound to happen. But this was not a one-game like service level. This was not a one-game circus board of, oh, well, maybe we're going to see Tennessee's offensive line be more improved. No, they got boat raced. They got bullied at times against Arkansas. They got bullied at times against Kentucky. And I'm not saying that Arkansas and Kentucky don't have good defensive lines, but I am saying that there was a clear gap at offensive tackle this year. You pay to bring in the 5-star from Charlotte. Make sure that he is on the field week 1. Make sure that he is up to speed week 1, because you cannot afford to get Nico killed. Like, I don't know what your backup plan is at quarterback next year, because I'm not sure who's going to enter the portal, who's going to be back. If you're bringing in a veteran, what?
I think it's Merklinger.
Sure, but like if he sticks around, he doesn't enter the portal. Like, I mean, that's what we're that's what we're talking about here. They gotta get David Sampson Jr. up to speed. Like, he has got to be a part of the game one. David Sampson up to speed. He has got to be a game plan, day one starter, no questions asked. If you paid it for him to be there, he better be out on the field. So whatever it takes.
The problem I've always heard with that kid is I don't know how much he loves football. Big money.
I don't. Then he better fucking love football in about 5 seconds.
Better love football in 5 seconds.
He better love football in about 5 seconds that he walks on campus.
Speaking of the position, you hate to do this because he's been with Heupel for so long, and it's easier said than done when you're just a fan sitting here or just a talking host like myself here saying, go let somebody go from a job. But I think it's time to let go of Glenn Ellerby. And
you got to let go.
Going back to UCF. Dude, the recruiting's not there. Like, I remember evaluating Shamarad and Umarov, and he's not an SEC caliber player here, man. And I know there's a lot of offensive lines across the sport that aren't what we were used to seeing a couple of years ago. It's just the offensive line position has regressed some. But, man, it's just not they most of the guys that have contributed for them have been transfer portal guys. They haven't developed any high school guys. The offensive line doesn't ever really get better. They just totally run off a numbers game. If you have 5 to 6 in the box, if they think they can run on you, they're going to try it. But if you're low in the box, they're going to throw it. I mean, again, that's basic football stuff. But Tennessee is really just a numbers cruncher game. That's all they do. It's really what it is across the board. I just don't think there's a lot of development going across the offensive spot right now with the offensive line spot with with my guy Glenn Ellerby, who, I came in right after him and saw what the offensive line was left at UCF, and it wasn't great either. He doesn't do a great job of evaluating high school guys and then not developing. You got to be one or the other in college football. You either got to be a great recruiter like Mario Cristobal was at Alabama, because a lot of people realize Mario Cristobal isn't the greatest football coach in the world.
No, he's a great recruiter. Hell of a salesman.
Yeah, but once like Kyle Flood and them got in there, those guys developed a little bit better. Mario was getting the big engines in, but couldn't develop them. Kyle Flood probably wasn't the greatest recruiter in the world, but he could develop them a little better. You got to be one or the other. Most aren't both, because most offensive line coaches hate recruiting. I call it, they hate it. They just want to be good old ball coaches. But I think you hate saying it. You got to cut the cord with Glenn Ellerby.
2, go get Kevin Concepcion. I'm not even going to just say wide receiver. Go get Kevin Concepcion. The dude currently is looking for another home. He's apparently going to go visit Penn State. He's going to wait until after the new year to make his decision. He's already visited Alabama. He's already visited Auburn. He's already visited Colorado. He's visited Florida State. Go make a phone call and say, hey, we need a wide receiver for our quarterback that we think can win a national championship. Pay him what he wants, because that's what's missing. They need a guy that can be a difference maker in the middle of the field and take short passes and work 15 to 17 yards to set up first downs and keep this offense going. Because if they're one of the most fast-tempo offenses in college football, when you look at the snap counts per game, they are always in the top 3. You got to get a guy that can just move the sticks. That's a dude. Go get Kevin Concepcion. There's a reason why he was a freshman all-ACC player of the year. Like, you don't do that at a place like NC State. You don't do that at most schools unless you're special. and he's looking for his next destination. Why is Rocky Top not in that conversation? Like, I'm not even saying go get a wide receiver. I'm saying go get that wide receiver, a player that you believe can do it all, can win in the short, can win in the long game, can win can win out of the backfield on jet sweeps. But give Nico a quality weapon that you can trust. Because if I see another drop ball, if I see another bad route, if I see another errant pass that goes over the head or a miscommunication, he is not going to do that. He is going to be that guy that just constantly is taking the minor routes, the swing patterns, the short intermediate, the curls, the comebacks, and he's going to work upfield. He's going to get your first downs and put you in positive position. Go get Kevin Concepcion.
Yeah, I would just get a new OC. Again, I hate being the axe man here, as we always used to laugh about in college football when people had to go tell people to go to the coach's office this time of year. But I think you need new ideas from a guy, unlike a guy like Joey Hazel, who's, again, been with him for a while. You need some new ideas. It's year 4 if you're Josh Heupel. You got to do some self-reflecting now. I've been in the league for 4 years. I know what to expect. I know the personnel on my opposition. You got to go change that up. Hey, how do people have a read on us? How do they have these tips and cues already for us? Why aren't we being producing offensively like we were in my first 2 years here? It's not just a Joe Milton thing anymore. We can't say that. We struggled with our biggest quarterback get of all in Tennessee history outside of Peyton Manning. Like, everybody was hyping up Nico. I mean, So why can we not take that next step? We need to go figure that out. I need new ideas in the room. You don't need yes man. And this is what a lot of coaches in this industry struggle with, that a lot of people don't think about, is a lot of coaches in this industry say they want new ideas, but they really don't. They want yes man. They just validate ideas. If Josh Heupel wants to take this, and I say it, I'm standing on it right now until things change. Tennessee is an 8 to 10 win program every year that can make it into the college football playoffs, but I don't think they're ever really going to win a national championship. I don't think they're going to win an SEC championship, because I think the offense, when they go get deeper into a season and play better teams along the line of scrimmage, and specifically on the defensive line, I think they're going to get exposed. And I think they're going to get in second and third in long situations, and Tennessee can't go tempo and not allow defenses to get their cleats in the ground. And they struggle when they don't get people in it, because a lot of that is built off just numbers and misalignment. I think you need new ideas in the offensive room. I'm sorry, but I think you got to get rid of 2 coaches. And I think it's Glenn Ellerbe and I think it's Joey Hazel.
Surprisingly, we have a Big Ten fan watching the show that took my number 1. Get your tight end. Just get you a tight end, honestly. And the reason why is because the tight end position is your security blanket for any young quarterback to get better. You want to know who was the best tight end in the Big Ten this year? Tyler Warren. You want to know who needed to improve drastically to live up to his hype? Drew Aller. Why not take a page out of that playbook and actually utilize it next year? So thank you to PSU Jim for bringing up the point. He's 100% correct. If you think at this point that you can be a team that can win offensively with a good ground game and a solid offensive identity through the passing attack, whenever you have a tight end that you know 90% of the time is going to be the difference maker, it makes your life so much easier. I think that tight end is the most underappreciated position in college football. I think it's the most underappreciated position in football, because you ask them to block, you ask them to create running lanes for your backfield, you ask them to be weapons on short to intermediate yards, you ask them to be fast enough to go up against outside linebackers and safeties, but also physical enough to beat them in man coverage. You ask them to be able to take the tops off of defenses. You ask them to be able to work the intermediate. You ask them to be able to have strong hands, and you ask them to be physical after the catch. Get that dude. And I don't know who that is, and I know it's very hard to come by a tight end, but if you can add that with a solid run game, I have no problem with it.
You're bashing your boy Miles Kittelman, and
I am.
Everybody will he's gone, but I think a lot of people thought we'd get a little more out of Holden Stays. But you're right.
I thought Holden Stays was going to be a stud this year.
A tight end, it can go in the middle of the field, changes up the way
it opens up your offense so much.
Yeah, and that was never. And Kittelman was their best tight end, and he's more of a fullback.
And the problem is that the problem is that your offense can also be so much more, can have so much more speed. It can have so much more up tempo with the tight end, because of you have to start preparing for them across the middle of the field.
Well, their best offense was in 2022 when they kept lining up Princeton Fant, getting different mismatch. Him and Jalen Hyatt in the middle, in the slot kind of position, the inside receivers lanes, was hell for safeties, because it's like, do you take this receiver as a 4-3 guy, or you take this athletic tight end that used to be a power forward on the bat and was bad in high school and basketball.
Just give me a dude that weighs 240 pounds that is going to work the 12 to 15 yard range and not drop passes and be able to block for my running back. Give me that guy. Because I'll tell you what, if you have that dude, you're fine. And it's not like Tennessee has not been able to have tight ends. We've seen them in the past. The Philip Fulmer era was great with tight ends. And guess what? The Philip Fulmer era was also great with running backs. So just get back to that. That's all I'm asking for. Because of Drew Aller, nobody is going to be complaining in State College if he has another good year because the tight end play has been such a blessing to him. They don't care. They don't have a stud wide out on the outside. They want a dude across the middle of the field. Give me that guy. And if it isn't, and by the way, if it is Kitzelman, fine. If it stays next year, it stays. But get them more involved. Which again goes to your point. You got to change up the offensive identity. You have to. There's just no sugarcoating it. Let's go through some transfer portal moves before we get on out of here. Isaiah Horton, former 4-star wide receiver, number 2 dude at Miami, going to Bama. I like the fit. I do.
Yeah, a lot of teams, I think, in the SEC right now are looking for those X receivers. He brings a different dynamic that Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard do not have. If you have the X on the outside, it can win his one-on-one matchups or even attract safety help over the top. That helps everybody. A big-time X that wins his one-on-ones, that scheme be damned. My guy's just better than your guy, at least on this specific play. I mean, that's a difference maker. And then back shoulder throws in the red zone. Again, I think it's what Texas misses at times, a big possession body guy that they can take advantage in the red zone. But everybody's looking for this. I think Bama has a chance. This is they have 3 different kind of wide receivers in this room. So I like what Coach Shepard and them are doing over there.
I think the other thing that I really love about just this fit is that he now gets to be a difference maker opposite of the speed that we see from Ryan Williams, who, by the way, is only going to get better. He is. And the route running of Jeremy Bernard. So you basically find your third man, which now makes it easier to open up the passing attack to the 2 guys on the outside or in the slot. You got a guy that will win with finesse route running. You have a guy that will win with just straight line speed, and you got a guy that will win with physicality. And the thing that's really important here, who was their best blocker at Coral Gables this past year in the open field? It was Isaiah Horton. It was 100% him. And so now you're throwing him into the mix to be able to open up for Jam Miller, to open up for Buck, the guy, the running back you just had in from Mobile in the 2025 class. You feel really good about now having a guy that will be effective on 3 downs. He basically is going to be your Kendrick Law and Kobe Prince replacement. Let's also talk about Caleb Odom, who left. He was expected to be the long-term X going Ole Miss. I like this fit too because of its multiple years of eligibility, and it's going to save you from using Cunningham too soon and burning his eligibility. You can utilize him, but you don't need him to start right away. He can get acclimated to Lane Kiffin's offense. I think it's a really smart move. It's a guy that can be a replacement for a Trey Harris, and he's got multiple years of eligibility.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Mississippi kid transferring over there. I mean, they need him. I mean, they're losing Jordan Watkins. Trey Harris is gone. Juice Wells is gone. There's going to be receptions to be had, and I like Austin Simmons coming in as the starting quarterback next year, most likely. Unless our guy, some Penn State guys in here, the Penn State backup quarterback, Petrula, he's trained. I saw you OV'd there.
Bo Pegulia.
Yeah, so I saw him maybe competing for a backup spot, and then Mikey Keene, who's out on the West Coast as well.
Well, Keene's gonna. Do you think Keene's gonna go to Ole Miss, or do you think he's?
No, I don't think he just visited there. Is what I was saying.
I could see Bo make it down there. I could. And honestly, I don't think it's the worst thing because of what was the best part about Jackson Dart in 2023? He got pushed. They brought in Spencer Sanders. They said, "Hey, we think that you're good, but we're not going to guarantee you shit."
Well, especially with Austin Simmons being on the baseball team, it may be one of those things you're kind of like, "Hey, I need you focused on selfishly." And it's going to piss Mike Bianco off, but yeah, they're going to need you focused solely on football if you're going to be the starting quarterback heading in 2025. So therefore, we need you in spring, brother.
They also added in Deuce Alexander, the wide receiver from Wake Forest, another really good playmaker, over 300 receiving yards this past year, stepped on up in 2 ACC games, had 2 60-yard performances, 3 years of eligibility. So this is a guy that may end up being a limited role player. But can you imagine if he would have gone to Mississippi State instead? He would have gone to Kentucky instead. And then he has a breakout game against Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin played it smart. He got a guy that was looking at an SEC school, brought in a guy that's going to be a difference maker in some capacity. And most of all, he's not going to be on the opposing sidelines. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to bring in a load of receivers. Probably more receivers than there's even reps to be had. They're just gonna stockpile and just let them fight it out in the spring, and they'll probably bring in somebody after the spring like he usually does.
Also landed, Florida landed a backup to now go behind DJ Lagway, Deshaun Pirtle from Charlotte.
Purdy, my guy.
Purdue? Is that how you say it?
Yeah. What is? Because it's spelled Purdie, right?
It is Purdy. My apologies. What do you think of it?
I'm surprised he didn't get. It's interesting. I need to go ask around about it. Because I talked to a lot of people who were fired up about Omega Blake or watching Omega Blake, and a lot of people, the antennas went up. I mean, Georgia Mississippi State offered Purdy. So the antennas went up, and we're like, who's this guy throwing the rock to Omega Blake? And I think that got a lot of people. And he was a freshman this year and put up numbers at Charlotte. It's interesting. He's in the same class as DJ Lagway. Him going to Florida, I don't know. Maybe he just wants to maybe get there and then maybe see what else is out there. I don't know. It's an interesting. And I'm actually surprised he didn't get more run from some teams. I thought once Georgia kind of threw that hat in, I was like, all right, here he goes. Because somebody called me and was talking about it. I was like, I hadn't watched the kid. So I went and turned him on. I was like, yeah, multi-year guy as a freshman, dude. Somebody should take this guy. Like if Diego Pavia left Vanderbilt, which, I mean, that's not final yet, but it looks like he may get that extra year of eligibility. But why wouldn't they have gone after him? I was really impressed with Purdy. So he's undersized now. He's 5'10". Again, I don't think he's a championship level quarterback, but I think he's in that winnable range in a mid-tier SEC team. But yeah, I see why Florida would want him. Him going to Florida when DJ Lagway's in your class is a little strange.
If I would have told you that 2 years ago, a Colorado linebacker who had good reps would be transferring to help out Alabama, what would you have said? Probably.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been great, but big pickup.
Green is going on over to Tuscaloosa. Really good fit last season. I think he led the Buffs in tackles. Number 2 in tackles. My apologies. 72 stops. Fits a hole. I mean, they're going to lose Deontay Lawson. They're going to lose Shahad Campbell. It's a guy that you can probably have at least meaningful reps. Yeah.
I'll say this. If Diego Pavia's ruling officially holds, Justin Jefferson can come back because he's a JUCO year.
Yeah. But still, it's a guy that can start right away. It's a guy that can be a rotational player. It's a guy that bears your defense. I like the fit.
Yeah, I mean, you had to.
You had to bring in somebody.
Anybody there you had to bring in, but at least he's a productive all Big 12 kid. Again, I hadn't dove into his film a ton, but he looks very productive. So, I mean, again, you had to add him in. So, I mean, yeah, maybe he's next to Justin Jefferson. If that doesn't officially get ruled, Alabama's going to have 2 new starting inside linebackers. At least need another guy or 2 at least to go compete for the position there, especially with what they're losing on the defensive line as well. Bama's got a lot of work to do in the front 7, but it's a good start.
Good night. Good college football start. Good playoff. We got games. That was the most important part. We got games that were meaningful, and we still got games going ahead. And by the way, we knocked this out in 90 minutes before you had to go ahead and worry about your holiday season. But he's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson. Make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification down below because we go live 3 times a week. College football never sleeps. Neither do we. Make sure that you're following us on all the social channels. The link is in the description. Follow us on, make sure that you also download the podcast version of the show. Link is also in the description. Follow Dave at Mach 10 Sports. Me and Cole Thompson. And check out all of our great work found at SECunfiltered.com. For Dave Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson. Merry Christmas to all, and to all, we'll see you soon. Peace.